The Millionaire CEO rejected the poor tour guide. 24 hours later, he was on his knees begging her. "I'll give you $10,000 cash right now to take me to a hotel with a marble floor," yelled Luigi Weaver, a millionaire CEO at Annelese, who sat behind the wheel of a vibrating Jeep that looked like it was held together by vines and stubbornness. Luigi was used to the grey world, sterile offices and private jets, but now he was barefoot in the mud, clutching a leather briefcase like a life jacket. Annelese, a 28-year-old naturalist who hadn't touched a dollar bill in years, didn't even blink. She just adjusted a crate of sea turtles and revved her rusted engine. "The jungle doesn't take cash, Luigi," she replied calmly, "and your ego is too heavy for the shocks." Before we continue the story, comment below which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Luigi Weaver stood in the middle of a muddy tropical artery that barely qualified as a road. He was waving a thick, rubber-banded stack of $100 bills at a vehicle that looked like it had been salvaged from the bottom of a lake. It was a Jeep, technically, but it was held together by oxidized bolts, woven vines, and what Luigi suspected was dried chewing gum. At 35 years old, Luigi was a man who lived his life in high-definition, climate-controlled environments. He was a titan of the grey world, the world of concrete, steel, and quarterly earnings. Today, he was wearing a bespoke, ivory-colored wool suit tailored in Milan. On his wrist sat a $50,000 timepiece that synchronized with atomic clocks in 3 different continents. In his hand was a leather briefcase containing the destiny of this very jungle, the Schumacher Plaza blueprints. Annelese, 28, sat behind the wheel of the vibrating Jeep. She didn't look like a tour guide. She looked like a part of the landscape. Her hair was a wild, sun-bleached halo of curls, and her skin was the color of polished teak. She was currently wearing a faded tank top that said, "The Earth doesn't have a reset" button, and a pair of boots that had clearly seen more miles than Luigi's private jet. She didn't even look at the money. She was staring at a small, shivering green turtle sitting in a shoebox on her lap. "Mr. Weaver," she said, her voice a calm, melodic contrast to his frantic barking, "you're currently standing in the lungs of the planet, and right now you're polluting them with a lot of noise. That $10,000? Out here it's just fancy kindling. The jungle doesn't take American Express, and neither do I." Luigi's face turned a shade of purple that matched the ripening dragon fruit in the trees above. "Listen to me, you bohemian nomad. My limousine service vanished. My satellite phone is down to 2 bars. I have a meeting with the Minister of Land in 4 hours to sign a deal. That will bring civilization to this mosquito-infested swamp. Now, get that reptile out of the seat and drive." Annelese finally looked up. Her moss-green eyes weren't angry, they were pitying. "This reptile is a hawksbill hatchling with a cracked shell, Luigi. He's a very important person, You're just a guy in a very expensive, very hot suit who is slowly sinking." She was right. Luigi looked down. His $2,000 Italian loafers, the ones made from the finest calfskin, had disappeared into the chocolate-colored sludge. The more he stomped his feet in anger, the deeper he sank. "Fine," Luigi screamed, throwing his hands up. $5,000 just to get me to a place with air conditioning, and I'll buy the turtle a new shell, a gold one." "Get in," Annelese sighed, patting the rusted passenger seat. "But there are rules. Rule number 1, the shoes stay outside. This Jeep has a soul, and she doesn't like the taste of dead cow." "You want me to go barefoot?" Luigi whispered, horrified. "Or you can wait for the marble floor hotel to come to you." She revved the engine. "Though the last time I checked, the nearest one is a 3-day hike through Jaguar territory." "Your call, Schumacher." Luigi looked at the dark, looming wall of trees. He looked at the mud swallowing his ankles. With a whimper that would have destroyed his reputation in any boardroom, he kicked off his loafers, clutched his briefcase to his chest, and climbed into the vibrating, doorless Jeep. The first hour of the journey was less of a drive and more of a rhythmic assault on Luigi's spine. Every time the Jeep hit a pothole, which was approximately every 4 seconds, Luigi's head threatened to disconnect from his neck. "Why is there a tree in my lap?" Luigi yelled over the roar of the engine. Annelese had handed him a massive potted fern the moment he sat down. "That's a silver tree fern," she shouted back. "She's sensitive to vibrations. Your job is to act as a human shock absorber." "Hold her steady, Luigi. If a frond snaps, we're going to have a problem. I am the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar development firm," Luigi cried, trying to balance the heavy pot while his briefcase slipped toward the open side of the Jeep. "I have negotiated mergers that changed the face of the European economy. I am not a shock absorber for a plant." "Then you're not a very good CEO," Annelese countered, navigating a sharp turn that sent a spray of mud directly onto Luigi's ivory lapel. "A good leader knows how to protect the most vulnerable members of the team. Right now, that's the fern. Keep her steady, or I'm charging you a botanical distress fee." Luigi gripped the pot until his knuckles turned white. He was a man obsessed with control, yet here he was, barefoot, mud-splattered, and being held hostage by a woman who valued a weed more than his net worth. "So, Annelese," Luigi said, trying to regain some semblance of authority, "what's the real price? Everyone has one. You want a house in the hills? A scholarship? I can write a check that will make this Jeep look like a bad dream. Just tell me what you want." Annelese laughed. It was a bright, genuine sound that echoed through the canopy. "You think everyone is a transaction, don't you, Luigi? That's your tragedy. I have everything I want. I have clean air, I have a job that matters, and I have a Jeep that, most of the time, moves. What could you possibly give me? A digital watch that tells me I'm running out of time? A piece of paper that says, I own a piece of the earth? I already belong to the earth. I don't need a receipt for it." Luigi stared at her. He wanted to call her crazy, but there was a terrifying amount of logic in her eyes. She wasn't broke because she failed. She was a naturalist because she had succeeded. In escaping the very cage, Luigi spent 20 hours a day building for himself. "Wait." Luigi squinted at a small laminated badge hanging from the rearview mirror. "Dr. Annelese Thorne, PhD in ethnobotany from Oxford. You're the Thorne from the papers, the one who discovered the cure for that respiratory parasite in the Amazon?" "I preferred the jungle to the lab coat," she said simply. "The lab was too much like your world, Luigi. Too much who gets the credit, and not enough who gets the cure. I decided to spend my life where the medicine actually grows." Luigi's mouth hung open. This wasn't a poor tour guide. This was a genius who had walked away from the very pinnacle of the world he worshipped. Before he could process this, the Jeep hissed and came to a dead stop in a clearing. "Why have we stopped? Is it the engine? I'll pay for a new engine." "The engine is fine," Annelese said, hopping out. "But the judge has called a recess. We need to pay our taxes." "The judge?" Luigi scrambled out of the Jeep, clutching his briefcase. "What judge? Is there a local tribunal?" "Good. I can handle officials. I have a consultation fee ready in my bag." "Not that kind of judge," Annelese pointed upward. High above them, sitting on a branch that overhung the road, was a macaque the size of a small child. His fur was a shimmering, dignified silver, and his face was set in a permanent, grumpy scowl. He wasn't moving. He was just watching them with uncomfortably intelligent eyes. "That's JJ," Annelese whispered. "Judge of the jungle. He's the self-appointed gatekeeper of this pass. He doesn't like loud noises, and he especially doesn't like people who smell like expensive cologne and stress." "It's a monkey, Annelese, a literal animal." Luigi reached into his pocket and pulled out his gold-plated satellite phone. "I need to call Marcus. My partner is probably wondering why I haven't arrived to steamroll this place yet." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Annelese warned. "JJ has a thing for shiny objects. He thinks they're ego baubles." Luigi ignored her. He held the phone high, searching for a signal. "Hello? Marcus? Can you hear me? The connection here is—" Whoosh! A blur of silver fur dropped from the sky. Before Luigi could blink, the weight of a 20-pound primate hit his shoulders. "Gah! Get it off! It's attacking me! It's a biological assault!" JJ didn't bite. He didn't scratch. With the precision of a master pickpocket, his small, leathery fingers snatched the gold phone right out of Luigi's hand. But he didn't stop there. He planted a foot on Luigi's face, used the leverage to swing toward the Jeep, and grabbed the handle of the leather briefcase sitting on the passenger seat. No, not the deeds. Luigi lunged, but he tripped over his own bare feet and landed face first in a patch of wild ginger. By the time he looked up, JJ was 30 feet up in a mahogany tree. The monkey was holding the phone to his ear, letting out a series of rhythmic, screeching barks that sounded suspiciously like Luigi's phone voice. Then, with a casual shrug, JJ opened the briefcase. Annelese, he's opening it. Those are legal documents, original signatures. If those are lost, the Schumacher Plaza deal is dead. Annelese leaned against the Jeep, crossing her arms. Well, Luigi, it looks like the judge has reviewed your case, and he's not impressed with your evidence. JJ pulled out a thick stack of blueprints. He looked at them, turned them upside down, and then began to slowly, methodically tear them into long, thin strips. He let the paper drift down like snow onto Luigi's head. I'll kill him. I'll sue the jungle. Luigi was sobbing now, a grown man in a ruined suit, surrounded by the confetti of his own ambition. He won't give the phone back unless you show him you're a friend, Annelese said, her voice stifling a laugh. JJ hates arrogance. He needs to see a gesture of total submission. You need to do the dance of the humble ape. The what? Get on one leg, put your hands behind your head, and hop while making a whoop-whoop sound. It's jungle law, Luigi. Do you want your phone back or not? Luigi looked at the monkey. The monkey looked at Luigi. JJ held the gold phone over a deep, dark ravine, his thumb hovering over the drop position. Whoop, whoop. Luigi started, his face burning with a shame that no amount of money could wash away. Louder, Luigi. JJ has high standards for choreography. And so, the 35-year-old billionaire hopped. He flapped his arms. He whooped until his throat was raw. He was a barefoot, muddy, broken man, dancing for the amusement of a primate and a 28-year-old girl who was currently filming the whole thing on her GoPro. JJ tilted his head, seemed to find the performance acceptable, and tossed the phone. It didn't fall into the ravine. It landed perfectly in Annelese's outstretched hand. The briefcase followed, hitting Luigi in the stomach with a dull thud. Luigi collapsed onto the ground, clutching his empty briefcase and his dignity-free life. You're a natural, Luigi, Annelese said, helping him up. I think that's the first time in your life you've done something just for the sake of survival, instead of profit. How does it feel? Luigi looked at the shredded blueprints on the ground. He looked at his shaking hands. I think I'm going to throw up. That's just the ego leaving the body. She patted his shoulder. Come on, we're only halfway there. The Jeep groaned as it climbed a steep, rocky path that seemed more like a dried-up waterfall than a road. Luigi, now stripped of his ivory suit jacket and sporting a naturalist glow, which was mostly just sweat and ginger flower pollen, held onto the roll bar for dear life. We're staying here for the night, Annelese announced as they pulled into a small clearing perched on a cliffside. Before them sat a structure that Luigi's architectural firm would have labeled a temporary shed. It was a cabin built from reclaimed cedar and bamboo, with a roof made of overlapping palm fronds and solar shingles. There were no walls on the front half, just a wide porch that looked out over a sea of green canopy, stretching all the way to the horizon. Where's the rest of it? Luigi asked, stepping out and winced as his bare feet hit the cool, smooth wooden planks. This is it, Annelese said, hanging her keys on a hook made of a twisted root. Everything you need, and nothing you don't. Kitchen's there, rainwater shower is behind that curtain, and the bedroom is that hammock. Luigi looked at the single, hand-woven rope hammock swaying in the breeze. And where do I sleep? Is there a guest wing? A pull-out sofa with at least 300 thread-count linens? Annelese handed him a thin bamboo mat. The porch is yours, Luigi. The air is fresh, the view is 5-star, and the linens were woven by a local cooperative. If you get cold, there's a blanket, made of recycled wool. If you get scared, JJ usually sleeps in the mahogany tree 10 feet away. He's a light sleeper, so don't scream in your dreams. Luigi sat on the edge of the porch, his legs dangling over the edge of the world. He felt small. For a man who owned penthouses in 3 different time zones, the realization that he was currently being out-luxuried by a girl with a solar panel was jarring. "Why do you do it, Annelese?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "You have an Oxford PhD. You could be running a pharmaceutical giant. You could have a driver, a chef, a life where you never have to touch mud again." Annelese walked over, 2 wooden mugs of steaming herbal tea in hand. She sat down beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "I used to have all that, Luigi. I had the lab, the grants, the high-rise apartment. But I realized I was spending 80 hours a week studying life so I could afford to live for 4 hours on the weekend. I was a specialist in healing, but I was the most stressed, unhealthy person I knew." She took a sip of her tea, looking out at the stars beginning to poke through the purple dusk. "One day I realized that the people I was trying to save in these remote villages were actually happier than my colleagues. They didn't have much, but they had time. They had community. They had a connection to the dirt they walked on. I didn't want to study them anymore. I wanted to learn from them." Luigi looked at his own hands. They were soft, meant for tapping screens and signing checks. Annelese's hands were strong, scarred, and capable. "I've spent the last 10 years building things that replace the earth," Luigi admitted. "I thought that was progress. I thought that if I paved over the chaos, I was creating order. But looking at this, I think I just created a very expensive cage." Annelese smiled, a soft, genuine expression that made Luigi's heart do a strange flip-flop. "It's never too late to pick the lock, Luigi." For the first time in his adult life, Luigi Schumacher Weaver didn't reach for his phone to check the markets. He sat in the dark, listening to the symphony of the jungle, the chirps, the rustles, the distant call of a jaguar, and felt a strange, terrifying sense of peace. Before we dive deeper, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Thank you. Back to the story. The peace didn't last long. As the moon reached its peak, Luigi remembered the single bar of service he had seen earlier. He crept toward the kitchen area where Annelese had set up her emergency charger, a series of lemons connected by copper and zinc wires. "Come on, you sour little battery," Luigi hissed, plugging his dead satellite phone into the fruit. A faint glow appeared. The screen flickered to life. He had 3 unread messages from Marcus, his business partner. Luigi opened the first one, expecting a status update on the land deeds. Message 1. "Luigi, where the hell are you? The minister is losing patience. If you aren't here by morning, I'm taking the lead." Message 2. "Found the files you left on the server. You were too soft on the environmental protection clauses, Luigi. I've redrawn the plans. We aren't building a mall, we're clear-cutting the whole valley for a strip mine. Much higher margins. The board loves it." Message 3. Video. Luigi pressed play. Marcus was standing in Luigi's own office, drinking Luigi's expensive scotch. "By the way, buddy, I told the board you had a mental breakdown in the jungle. I've been appointed interim CEO. Don't bother coming back to the city. Stay with your monkeys. I've already sent the termination papers to your legal team. You're out, Luigi. You're broke, you're fired, and by tomorrow noon, the jungle you're sleeping in will be a memory." The phone screen went black. The lemon battery had given its last spark. Luigi felt a coldness wash over him that had nothing to do with the night air. He had been betrayed by the one man he trusted, and he had provided the weapon. The Schumacher Plaza wasn't a mall anymore. It was a death sentence for everything he had seen today. The sea turtles, the silver tree fern, JJ and Annelese. He stood up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had to get back. He had to stop the signature. But he had no car, no shoes, and no power. "He's going to kill it all," Luigi whispered into the dark. "I know," a voice said behind him. Annelese was standing in the shadows of the cabin, her arms crossed. She had been awake the whole time. "You heard the message?" Luigi asked. "I didn't need to hear it to know what men like Marcus do," she said, walking toward him. "But I did hear it. He sounds like the man you were yesterday morning, Luigi." "I have to go back," Luigi said, his voice desperate. "I have to stop him. I have the majority shares, but I need to be there in person to veto the vote. Annelese, please. I know I've been a nightmare. I know I mocked you, but if we don't move now, this entire valley will be gone. Annelese looked at him, searching his eyes for the old Luigi. She didn't find him. Instead, she saw a man who was terrified, not for his money, but for the world he had just discovered. The Jeep is low on fuel, she said. The bridge is washed out 5 miles down. The only way to the city in time is the Blackwater shortcut. It's a swamp, Luigi. It's thick, it's dangerous, and you'll have to travel in the turtle crate because the front seat is full of seedlings we're relocating. I'll ride on the roof if I have to, Luigi vowed. Just get me there. Annelese stepped closer. The distance between them vanished. In the dim light of the lunar glow, she saw the man behind the millionaire. She reached up, her hand resting on his cheek. Why do you care so much now, Luigi Schumacher Weaver? Because, Luigi whispered, his voice cracking, I finally found something worth more than $10,000 cash. He leaned in, and this time, the kiss wasn't a flow or a meditation. It was a desperate, romantic promise. They held on to each other as the jungle breathed around them. Two people from different worlds, united by a common enemy and a sudden, undeniable love. The Blackwater shortcut was a misnomer. It wasn't a shortcut. It was an endurance test designed by nature to break a man's spirit. 3 hours before dawn, the Jeep hit a patch of primordial ooze that would have swallowed a tank. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Out! We have to push! Annelese yelled. Luigi jumped from the turtle crate into the waist-deep swamp. The water was cold and smelled of ancient decay. He put his shoulder against the rusted metal of the Jeep and pushed with everything he had. Again! Annelese screamed, floorboarding the accelerator. The wheels spun, spraying Luigi with a cocktail of mud and swamp water. He slipped, his face hitting the muck. He stood up, gasping for air, his once pristine shirt now a brown rag. It's no use, Luigi cried out. We're stuck. I'm going to lose it all. Marcus wins. He fell back into the mud, the weight of the last 24 hours finally breaking him. He sat there, a 35-year-old billionaire in the middle of a swamp, defeated and shivering. Get up, Luigi, Annelese shouted from the driver's seat. I can't, he sobbed. I'm just a guy in a suit. I don't know how to do this. I'm not strong like you. I'm nothing without my money and my phones. Annelese hopped out and splashed over to him. She didn't offer a hand this time. She looked down at him. Is that what you want? To sit here and let Marcus turn this into a hole in the ground? You told me you wanted to save this place. Prove it. Luigi looked up at her through the mud. He realized that for his whole life, he had begged people to do things for him. He had begged for deals, begged for attention, begged for status, but he had never truly asked for help with his soul. He moved until he was on both knees in the thick, stinking mud. He looked up at Annelese, tears carving clean tracks through the grime on his face. Annelese, I am begging you, he whispered. Don't give up on me. I don't know the way. I don't know how to be the man this jungle needs. Help me, please. I'll do anything. I'll ride in the crate. I'll dance for JJ. I'll give up every cent I have. Just don't let me be the man who let this happen. It was the first begging, the humbling. The millionaire was gone. Only Luigi remained. Annelese's expression softened. She knelt in the mud beside him and pulled his head to her chest. I'm not giving up, Luigi, but you have to push one more time. Not for the company. For us. With a roar that startled the nearby herons, Luigi stood up. He felt a strength he hadn't known he possessed, a strength not born of ego but of love. He put his back against the Jeep, his muscles screaming, his bare feet digging into the roots beneath the mud. 1, 2, 3. The Jeep surged. The tires caught a submerged log. With a wet slop sound, the vehicle lurched forward onto solid ground. Luigi fell forward, laughing and crying at the same time. He was covered in filth, he was barefoot, and he had never felt more like a king. The sun was beginning to bake the asphalt of the city as the rusted Jeep rattled onto the main boulevard. It was a jarring transition. One moment, they were surrounded by the emerald silence of the canopy. The next, they were engulfed in the grey, sterile roar of civilization. Luigi looked down at himself. He was a walking disaster. His $5,000 ivory suit was now a variegated shade of swamp brown and ginger root orange. His shirt was missing 3 buttons, revealing a chest covered in a fine layer of dried mud. He was barefoot, his toes still stained with the dark earth of the Blackwater shortcut. Beside him, Annelese navigated the heavy city traffic with the same calm intensity she used in the jungle. She looked at him and smirked. "You look like you wrestled a jaguar and lost, Luigi. Are you sure you're ready for the den of lions?" Luigi checked the clock on the dashboard. 11:45 a.m. The meeting was in 15 minutes. I've never been more ready. For the first time in my life, I'm not hiding behind a tie. They pulled up to the glass and steel monolith that was Weaver International. The valet, a young man in a crisp uniform, stepped forward to open the door, then recoiled 3 steps, covering his nose. "Ma'am, you can't park this agricultural experiment here," the valet stammered, pointing at the mud-caked jeep. Luigi stepped out of the turtle crate. He stood tall, his shoulders back, his eyes burning with a fire that had been lit in the heart of the jungle. "The jeep stays, Brian," Luigi said. The valet's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Mr. Weaver, is that you? We heard you were in a terrible accident." "I was," Luigi said, reaching back to take Annelese's hand. "I accidentally grew a conscience. Now, clear the path." Luigi marched into the lobby, his bare feet slapping against the expensive Italian marble floor he had once obsessed over. It felt cold. It felt dead. He realized he preferred the warmth of the mud. People stopped and stared. High-powered executives froze with their espressos halfway to their mouths. Whispers followed them like a wake. "Is that him? He looks insane. Who's the girl?" Luigi didn't care. He squeezed Annelese's hand tighter. As they reached the elevator, he caught his reflection in the polished chrome doors. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man who had finally woken up from a very long, very expensive dream. The 40th floor boardroom was a tomb of silence and air conditioning. Marcus was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, surrounded by the 12 board members. On the table sat a leather-bound folder containing the New Horizon mining initiative, the death warrant for the sanctuary. "And so," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false solemnity, given Luigi's unfortunate mental collapse and disappearance, "I move that we finalize the vote to bypass the environmental restrictions and begin clear-cutting immediately." "I'd hold off on that signature, Marcus. The ink might run if you're sweating that hard." The double doors swung open. Luigi walked in, followed by Annelese. Marcus dropped his pen. His face turned a shade of white that matched Luigi's ruined suit. "Luigi, what in the... You're supposed to be... dead? Lost? Eaten by JJ?" Luigi walked to the table, his bare feet leaving faint muddy prints on the deep pile carpet. "Sorry to disappoint you, Marcus, but the jungle has a way of spitting out things it doesn't like, and it definitely didn't like the smell of your betrayal." One of the older board members, a woman named Mrs. Gable, leaned forward. "Luigi, look at yourself. You're disheveled. You're barefoot. Marcus said you'd had a breakdown." "I didn't have a breakdown, Mrs. Gable," Luigi said, standing at the foot of the table. "I had a breakthrough. I went into that forest to build a mall, and I realized I was trying to put a price tag on the air we breathe. Marcus didn't tell you about the mining initiative, because he wanted more profit, but he also didn't tell you that this project will violate 3 international environmental treaties that would bankrupt this company in lawsuits within a year." Marcus jumped up, slamming his hands on the table. "He's lying. He's gone native. Look at him. He's brought a gardener into our boardroom." Luigi turned to Annelese. "This isn't a gardener, Marcus. This is Dr. Annelese Thorne, Oxford PhD. The woman who discovered the thorn parasite cure. She's the lead consultant for the New World Wildlife Fund, and she has the legal standing to designate that valley a UNESCO-protected site." Annelese stepped forward, her presence commanding the room despite her faded tank top. She pulled a tablet from her bag. "I've already filed the preliminary injunction. If you sign that paper, Marcus, you aren't signing a contract. "You're signing a subpoena." The board members began to mutter. Marcus lunged for the contract, trying to sign it before the momentum shifted. "I'm still the interim CEO," Marcus screamed. "And I am the majority shareholder," Luigi said calmly. "And as of this second, I am invoking Article 4 of the bylaws. I am removing you for gross negligence and attempted fraud against the board." "You can't do this," Marcus shrieked. "You're a joke. You're barefoot." "I may be barefoot," Luigi said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face, "but I can still feel the ground. You've been standing on a rug for so long, you've forgotten there's a world underneath it. Security, escort Mr. Marcus out and tell him to be careful on his way out. The world is a lot bigger than this office." As the security team dragged a screaming Marcus from the room, Luigi sat in the CEO chair. He felt the leather against his skin. It felt like a cage. He looked at the board members. "Gentlemen, ladies, the Schumacher Plaza is dead. We are going to pivot. We are going to fund the Thorn Sanctuary. We're going to prove that protecting the world is more profitable than destroying it. And if you don't like it, my assistant will give you your severance packages." The board filed out, stunned and whispering. Finally, it was just Luigi and Annelese in the giant, glass-walled room. Luigi looked out the window at the city. It looked small. It looked grey. He looked at his desk, the mahogany, the gold pens, the statues of his success. It felt like a museum for a dead man. Annelese walked toward the door. "Well, Luigi Schumacher Weaver, you saved the valley. You saved your company. I guess my job here is done. The Jeep is downstairs. I should get the turtles back to the water before the sun gets too high." Luigi felt a sudden, sharp panic in his chest, a fear far greater than the fear of JJ or the swamp. "Annelese, wait." She stopped, her hand on the heavy glass door. She turned, her moss-green eyes unreadable. "Yes, Mr. CEO." Luigi walked toward her. He didn't stop until he was inches away. He looked at this woman who had seen him at his worst, screaming at a monkey, shivering in a hammock, begging in the mud. For the second time in 24 hours, Luigi Schumacher Weaver dropped to his knees. But this wasn't a begging for survival. This was a begging for a soul. "Luigi, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The floor is clean here. You don't have to push any jeeps." "I'm begging you, Annelese," Luigi said, looking up at her. "Don't leave me here. I can't go back to being the man in the suit. I saved the valley, but I haven't saved myself yet. I have all the money in the world, and I realize today that I am the poorest person in this building." He took her hands in his soft corporate hands gripping her strong, capable ones. "I don't want to run this company from a desk. I want to run it from the mud. I want to be the man you saw in the jungle. I'm begging you, stay with me. Teach me how to be a minimalist. Teach me how to live in the flow. I don't want a business partner. I want a partner in life." Annelese looked down at the 35-year-old millionaire. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. She saw the mud still under his fingernails. She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the canopy after a storm. "You're a very expensive project, Luigi," she teased, tears shining in her eyes. "You have a lot of bad habits to unlearn." "I'm a fast learner," Luigi promised. "And I've already got the shirt." Annelese pulled him up and wrapped her arms around his neck. They kissed, a long, deep kiss that signaled the end of the millionaire and the birth of a man. 6 months later, the tropical airstrip was buzzing with the arrival of a private jet. A man stepped off the plane, wearing a $10,000 charcoal suit. He was carrying 3 phones and shouting at a subordinate. "I don't care about the local customs. I want a limo, I want a cold drink, and I want to see the man in charge of this sanctuary nonsense. I'm here to buy it out." A said green Jeep rattled up to the tarmac. It was covered in even more vines than before, and a small solar-powered fan was taped to the dashboard. The driver hopped out. He was tan, his hair was messy and sun-bleached, and he was wearing a bright blue shirt covered in pink flamingos. He was barefoot. "I'll give you $50,000 to get me to a real hotel," the businessman screamed, waving a checkbook. Luigi Schumacher Weaver leaned against the hood of the Jeep and took a bite of a fresh mango. He looked at Annelese, who was sitting in the passenger seat, laughing as she recorded the whole thing. "Sorry, friend," Luigi said, his voice calm and melodic. "Money is just fancy kindling out here. But if you're lucky, my associate might take your check." High above in the mahogany tree, Judge of the Jungle, JJ, looked down at the new businessman. JJ reached out, checked the 50,000 gold watch strapped to his furry wrist, and let out a long, judgmental screech. Luigi winked at the monkey. "He says you're late for your lesson. Now, take off your shoes. The jeep is sensitive." As the jeep rattled away into the emerald heart of the forest, the billionaire was left standing in the mud, holding a fern, and wondering why, for the first time in his life, his money felt so heavy. Thank you for listening. Kindly subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. And don't forget to check out more touching stories by clicking here on the end screen.